We had an insured, we had their base coverage. It was an incumbent renewal, not a lot changing in the policy. Outmarket said, did you know their excess policy doesn't cover what they do? To which I said, we've had this account for 15 years or something, long before I arrived. The underwriter's comment was, well, it'll be a lot more expensive.
You're an agency owner of a 14 million revenue agency, and now you're running the retail agency of the 5th largest network at ISU. You have one of the sharpest minds when it comes to marketing and tech within an insurance agency.
Like any industry, you got to learn the heck out of it, right? What does the insured really need, right? What kind of loss control really helps them? What kind of problems are they facing? Tell Claude, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I need to figure out how to build a database with these sort of target information, being able to figure that out, understand it, and get in and have a reason to call or talk to a prospect other than, hey, I see your insurance is coming up in the next 90 days. That is so tired.
Where will you not use AI?
Anytime you can have a communication, free up all the other things you do and figure out how to have a good relationship with that client. You've got a person, they've got time for you. They can put in the effort. Now we're talking something special.
Lee, I'm really excited for this episode. One, I feel like you've had like multiple different lives within your career. And, one of the things, you made this post I saw recently, and I was talking to you about in some of our conversations about, you were in a band, and it's almost like you brought the band back together and had this really cool concert. There was like a lot of people there. And, you said that the band taught you a lot about insurance. I have no idea how that's possible. But can you walk us through that? What did the band teach you and help you about it within insurance specifically?
Yeah, I don't know if it would be necessarily insurance specifically, but certainly business. When you get to, we were a bunch of friends hanging out in Los Angeles, and I had recently quit my job I was in my early 20s. My mom was losing her mind. Why would you quit your job? I had a good job. Was doing sound for movies. So I quit that, moved in with a band, 6 guys in a 2-bedroom in Hollywood. And so then we pretty quickly realized that if we were going to make this work, we needed to be savvy. And some of that was, how are we going to present ourselves online? All right, I'll figure out how to make websites. What does merch look like? How do we sell it? What do our margins need to be? How does that work? Who does what? Who talks to the booking agents? You know what I mean? And there's a lot of that business savvy you don't realize that goes on even in a punk band. So, it was maybe 3 months of living in that house and kind of going, oh man, this is not going to go how we thought. And then we took it seriously and got signed to a record label. And then pretty soon we were on the Warped Tour. And then we were nonstop touring for about 4 years. I was home maybe a couple weeks a year. And from that transitioned into, all right, I know how to do online marketing now. I did it. Right. And took that into my next career. And that really paid off. Once you get an insurance, you can't get out, as everyone that listens to this podcast will know. Even though I'm trying to get the band going and making some money there, that's just a money loser at this point. But it's fun, figuring out how to do marketing. Every insurance agency has a pipeline, and they figure out how to make that pipeline work, and that's a big part of getting it done. So when I think about how do I show up online in an insurance agency perspective, what does that look like? It directly translates. So I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
I think it's really interesting in that, like, what you described was a small business owner starting a business from scratch. And we've got a product, and we need to figure out how to get awareness of this product. And then, like, you realize as a small business owner, you have to do everything. I remember starting out as an agent. When I was captive, it didn't matter. But when I went to, I shouldn't say that. When I was captive, it did matter, but I still had a lot of things that were done for me. It was more of like a franchise. When I was independent, the first big punch in the face I had was when I was getting my first out-of-state license.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, I didn't know that these were all different, one. Two, I didn't know that, like, okay, who do I reach out to? It's not just reaching out to the person that did this. It was, you've got to figure this out every single time, and you just have to figure out all the things. And it sounds like it was an interesting parallel. And you've been really successful in the insurance world, right? For a long time, you're an agency owner of a 14 million revenue agency. And I know you had exited your shares there. And now you're running the retail agency of the fifth largest network at ISU. And the reason for that I really wanted to have you on today's call was, I've told you this, and I've said this to other people. You have one of the sharpest minds when it comes to marketing and tech within an insurance agency. And I always thought this from the first time we met at the aforementioned agency. But one of the things that I've been wanting to do is get people on the show that have got real examples of using AI. And we talked about some of the ways that you're doing. I'm like, we got to get you on. Like, this is very interesting. And so we're going to cover two areas on that. We're going to cover policy checking. What's been your experience that? What tools are you using? How are you using it? What are some real examples that have came up? And then I want to dive into, this is where I think, you have some world-class ideas on, and the gathering public information to have better ways to reach out to drive business. That sounds big, broad, and convoluted. We'll get into the weeds on that, which I'm really excited about. But first, when we talk about policy checking, what's your process on that? What is that? Well, actually, let me even back up. What does that mean to you? And then what does your process look like for that?
Yeah, I can tell you. So I'm fortunate in that I found a great role at ISU Steadfast, and they are forward thinking. So when I come with an idea, I have to have it well thought out. They'll challenge my idea, but they're, for the most part, say, yeah, let's go for it, right? The ISU network has a great group within it called the Agency Principal Forum. And this Agency Principal Forum is like the me's of 50 different agencies kind of get together. We have a little chat internally. We have a forum message board. We meet up, and I'm able to bounce ideas off of these folks, right? So when I joined in September, so I haven't been here very long, we were doing policy checking, and we were doing it overseas. Very common. A lot of people do this. If you don't do policy checking, the idea here is maybe you have an incumbent carrier and you're moving them. It's a renewal. You're moving them to a new carrier. You want to make sure that you don't have anything missing, and they can get really nitty gritty into those forms and exclusions. And you can have a 300-page policy. Traditionally, you'd have somebody very senior in your office comb through it and make sure you're good. More often than not, more than people like to admit, nobody looks at anything, or they look over it very, very casually, and it doesn't really become an issue until it goes to court. And nobody wants that, right? So what we were doing was sending it overseas to our, hired VA company, very common. And those folks would have a list, a checklist. Does it have this? Does it have that? And they'd go through it. And it was cumbersome, slow, expensive. And I felt like maybe there's something missing here. Like this isn't catching what we need it to catch.
Did you catch anything real quick? Sorry, I know I'm interrupting you, but
Yeah.
did you catch anything where like, hey, we're paying for this. I found this. This was supposed to be good. What prompted that?
So within the ISU group, I get demo calls from companies like all the time. And so I was getting hey, we got a new AI tool. Hey, we got a new AI tool. About no joke, Callan, 9 of these companies were sort of competing for the policy checking. And I didn't know who to pick. I was overwhelmed and overloaded. It finally came to a head when I said, this is taking too long. Our process is not great. I've got to bite the bullet. And the ISU folks were using a company called Outmarket. Great. I said, you know what? I'm going to try that just because I know other companies using them in the ISU network. They had some good feedback on it. And so we used that. So we started going through, and it was picking up some things that we hadn't picked up. One of them was a suite number. We had it wrong for a couple of years. That's not good. You don't want a wrong suite number. If there's something really bad happens, the insurance carrier could deny coverage, et cetera. But the real big one was we had an insured. We had their base coverage. It was an renewal, standard incumbent renewal, not a lot changing in the policy. And we had a base policy. Outmarket said, all good, seems to be fine. But did you know their excess policy doesn't cover what they do? To which I said, we've had this account for 15 years or something, long before I arrived. And the account manager was immediately alarmed. saying, their excess policy doesn't cover what they do. What are they paying for? And then the underwriter knew. The underwriter's comment was, well, it'll be a lot more expensive.
Oh, man.
So right there, it's paying for itself. We're a better agency. We're doing better by clients. We're more thorough. It's not necessarily a time saver, but we're a better agency now because we're doing this process, and we're able to be more thorough. And then my fear, right? The fear is like, what if it makes up stuff? I've used ChatGPT since it came out, and it's made up all kinds of stuff. How does it know? Is it right? Well, the truth is, my process is I have a final person. They all have CIC designations, right? They're well-trained professionals, and the output from the policy checking gives citations. So you click on it, it opens the PDF right to the 300-page document, right to the correct area. It says, well, read it yourself. Here you go. So now we can check it, right? But it doesn't take so long.
What you just said, I think, is critical. A couple things. One, it's not so much an efficiency game, but it makes you a true advisor.
Yep.
Like you were, the example you gave, which I think is a phenomenal example, in that, the reality is if the price didn't go up dramatically, most wouldn't touch it. So you actually are adding time. That being said, I think where things are getting really interesting is, is this looking at, this is your limit that you have for X, whatever that risk is. And typically businesses like yours don't really see much there, but you're underinsured in this. So you're actually overinsured here, but underinsured here. Here's our suggestion on this. Cost is going to be relatively the same. That's where it's like the agents almost have to become a true advisor, and they're paying for that final mile that you just like. The value is in that final mile. I've got an example. I think I shared this with you where we'll create brains for each of our clients, and that'll have our call transcripts. That'll have the documents that we've gotten. Depends on the client, of course, but and if a new study comes in, we'll ping it against some of those and say like, hey, here's some things to be aware of, but you have to fact check it. Meaning, oftentimes I'll make sure like within my Claude skills and things like that it's surfacing a link or it's giving me the exact words. And so to your point, exactly where to go and to double check. The scary thing is, in its current state, how many people are just letting that fly regardless?
Yeah. And that's where it, like anything, just like in the, before AI, right? You just have to be a good operator. You got to do your due diligence, and you have to understand what the tools you're working with, how to use them, and then how to be a trusted advisor. I was using Copilot today and Claude, and Copilot completely made up something. And I knew it was wrong. And I questioned it, and I hate when you question it. It goes, oh, you're right. Well, okay. But that's the worst.
Well, one of the tips I got on this that I really liked was, and it sounds like you did the exact same thing, but when that does happen, or if you're unsure, validate it with a couple of them. Validate it with ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Copilot. And see, or is somebody else refuting that evidence? And of course, cross-link and cross-reference, read the actual links, read where this actually came from. But oftentimes you can use that in that way. Like if you built something in Claude, you're not sure, have ChatGPT review it. Now, I know what you're talking about. That's kind of like you had a one-off instance. You knew that as the expert that wasn't right. So then you tell it, and it gives you that, oh, you're right. Actually, I'm going to revise this based off of this. And so that's super interesting. No, I'm curious. You mentioned it makes you a better agency, and it puts you in more of an advisor status. Is it? And it might be way too early to tell on this, but are you seeing the impact on that? Are you seeing whether that's in NPS, customer satisfaction, referrals, whatever that might be? Are you seeing that at all yet, or is it too early to tell?
Several key accounts mentioning they really like the summaries, the new proposals. Going out of their way. We're not prompting them, right, to tell us. They're going out of their way to tell us. And my team are sending me notes, and they're excited, and they're saying, "Look at what I built. Look how I did this. Look what I found today." And it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And if it ever goes down and everyone yells, then you've got something good. And that happened. it goes down for an hour or something, some update, whatever, and everyone's freaking out. That's the best.
That is such a great point and is so true. Because I mean, the reality is you become dependent on I think everybody knows when Claude or ChatGPT is out
Yep.
because it's all over X, Reddit, whatever that might be. But that's such a great point. And I guess just while we're on the out market, is there anything else that you're using that for outside of the policy checking, or is that the main use case that you're using it for?
Proposals, but also submissions. So I'm a big proponent of being a good partner with our underwriters. Give them a good summary, right? That narrative is so important. And some people are good writers, some people are not great writers, and it doesn't need to be a paragraph. Your underwriter will tell you what they need and what they want. But when you can summarize and give a really holistic picture of an account, you've gone through the loss runs, you've really combed over it, that is so much easier to do now with AI, not the generic, chat GPT. I highly recommend you get an insurance designed chat for that. But once you do, it's a game changer.
What's the difference? Can you walk us through the difference?
Yeah. Still, I can put loss runs into chat GPT or Claude or Copilot, and it can make things up or miss things. And then you're having to comb through it line by line again anyway. When I put them into Outmarket, I get a much more accurate. I have not seen it not be accurate. I check them all anyway, just because but it's a lot faster because it has that citation button. So you can click on it and go exactly to the document and it opens up in the same window. So the checking is much faster, but the submission narrative is a much cleaner way to send details to an underwriter. And then you get to the top of the stack, right? You keep sending them good stuff that they understand. It's not that they always need the cleanest account. Producers get that wrong. It's they need to understand how to price it. If they can't understand how to price it, then they're lost. They're not going to give you a price, or they're going to reject it, or it's going to get the standard treatment. But if you want a special relationship with an underwriter, do a good job with your submissions.
What has been the response of underwriters when you've used that process?
Great. It's fast. It's good. We're getting communications back, faster than we used to. It's a bit tricky. You have to temper it sometimes. It's kind of like anything when you're using AI. It may be a bit verbose and you need to trim it down, but you just tell it that.
100%. Okay. I want to talk a little bit now on like the new business side. I've said this before, and you've proved this in the trucking space pretty heavily. You had some of the most unique ways of driving this business. Now, I'd love to talk about, you gave an example when we were preparing for this show on how you're using AI to comb public information and generate opportunities as a result. Can you walk us through what that looks like specifically?
Yes. So in trucking, you have a lot of public information. If anybody's dealt with trucking, you know about the FMCSA. They publish a ton of data. Typically, that data was you had to pay a third party to get access to that data. I still do because underwriters are looking at, I use CAB. I love CAB. They're great. But I can go and get that data now. Before, it was too unwieldy. It was, hundreds of thousands of rows in an Excel spreadsheet, and the data is not that clean, and it's hard to work with, and your computer will freeze up and forget it, right? Very tough. Now with AI, I can get very specific. So I know, from like any industry, you got to learn the heck out of it, right? What does the insured really need? Right? What kind of loss control really helps them? What kind of problems are they facing? So I did a lot of research into that, figuring out what trucking companies are really looking for in safety. And so in that, I can identify some key areas, tell, I'm using Claude for this, tell Claude, hey, this is what I'm looking for. I need to figure out how to build a database with this sort of target information. I need the owner's name, their email, their phone number, their address. I want to filter out, these particular carriers they're with. And I'd love a little email message so I could just copy paste it right out of Excel. And it's great. It's great at that. It specifically pulled me trucking companies that maybe have done a poor job with their DOT compliance. So then I know when I call or I have my team call, we can have a narrative there. Another one would be around, work comp X dates. OSHA data, new construction startup. There's a lot of public data. The problem is the data sets are so massive that your average person just couldn't even deal with them. That has changed. Being able to figure that out, understand it, and get in and have a reason to call or talk to a prospect other than, hey, I see your insurance is coming up in the next 90 days. That is so tired. The game is changing a bit. And, your big shops do this kind of thing already, but typically maybe they have the money to buy in sort of infinite resources, right? And they'll have a third party that comes in and does this for them. Well, now you can get that done with a relatively inexpensive subscription to an AI model.
So if I'm playing that back, what I'm hearing you say is, you gave the trucking example specifically, but there's public information. And really, I mean, it's what I'm kind of hearing is like, if you have a niche and you really know that niche, the specific items that could be public information, that if you had them, you can have a much better introductory conversation, or doesn't necessarily be introductory. It could be a current client as well. But essentially, if you really know that, you can have AI make sense of large data sets and disorganized data sets to pull the key information that is important to the niche that you serve, and helps when you're doing outreach, you come off as an expert in what they're doing. You make them aware of something that they may not have realized. And as a result, have a much higher conversion rate on that. And I think probably one of the most important things, it's like almost that this stuff isn't new. It's just, if you were to be successful at this, you had to have a lot of resources to deploy it. And now the playing field is level on that. Is that correct? Or is there anything I missed on that?
Yeah, that is exactly correct. It does take someone playing around with AI, right? And I'm lucky I joined up with ISU and I said, hey, I need a Claude subscription, with upgraded subscription. They said, no problem. What are you going to do with it? Okay, let's go. And so being an organization that is forward thinking like that with guardrails, and then being able to take the initiative on finding the problem, identifying the problem, solving the problem, and then implementing it. Don't go looking for problems to solve. Have a problem and solve it.
Not a hammer looking for a nail, but what is going to be the best problem for my current workflow, where we're operating. So I have a question on that. Are you using Cowork to do that, automatically, or a scheduled task, or what does that look like?
For this, for my sort of leads list creation, using Cowork, I have it as a project and I can refine it and change things as needed. But once you get a list, you can work it for a while, right? So spit out, 5,000 trucking companies that had particular issues with their safety that I knew that when we call, we can bring those up and sound a lot more intelligent than if we didn't do that.
Yeah.
And it works.
How are you using it, as part of your outreach process? So you mentioned that you'll have it draft emails. Where else are you using it to make that more efficient?
I haven't done it. I've talked to some other ISU members that have been into mailers, and I'm like, man, I've tried mailers and it just never works for me. But maybe I'll dip back into mailers again. So, you think about how can I get in front of an insured? Well, I'm going to cold call them. I'll cold call, right? Like, I think it's very important, even for people that maybe in a senior leadership role, to get down and do the work. Like, do it so you understand it, because if you understand it, then you can figure out how to solve it or make it better, right? So I'll do a policy change. I'll cold call. I'll, jump in on a certificate request that's a bit tricky, whatever. But in marketing, it's I want to show up online. So how do I get higher up in the search engine? Does that even matter now with the generative search is at the top of every Google search now? Am I showing up there? Understanding how to show up there. Then it's showing up in their mailbox. Maybe that's a thing again. I don't know. Certainly showing up in their email inbox, and then reaching out, right? Just calling them. And it's a sequence of those things. It's never, I've found any one thing. It's always like a multitude of things. And I want to stress this. All of those things are done to get more referrals, because the number one thing is always referrals. So figuring out how to get referrals, how to do a better job on your customer service.
That mailing is interesting. So there's this new concept of a loop that's getting a lot. It's got a lot of popularity. But so I'll give you an example. Jack Dorsey was talking about this is going to get a little out there, but
Okay.
essentially at Block, what they're doing is everything's recorded. There's an artifact for everything, meaning it creates a document. It knows all the financials. It has every conversation is recorded, and there's a breadcrumb trail for everything that's done within Block at all. Now, I know most people are probably hearing that and they're like, "That sounds like the epitome of hell." And I'm in that boat for the large part. But here's where it gets interesting. They're going really far, and I don't know that I fully agree with this, but in saying like everybody is they want essentially one layer. Everybody's an individual contributor. And there's no management layer because because it can review and see everything, it knows exactly where resources are being allocated. It knows exactly where the bottlenecks are. It knows exactly what's successful, what's not successful. And then based off of that, it makes those essentially decisions to self-improve on those things. Okay. I know a lot of people are also hearing that and they're like, so I'm being managed by AI. That sounds awful. Agreed. And so, like I said, it's gonna be a little out there. Now, here's what's interesting why I hear about the mailing one in particular is interesting to me. Is that is definitely a process. You can be a risk and you got to know that you may lose some money doing this, but there's no reason why AI can't create the copy, interact with as a fully agentically as an agent interacting with whether you use a vendor, whether you use an online, you set it up all of yourself, writes the copy, gets all the stats, the reply, how many were sent, what are the replies, how many leads did we actually get, and then makes its own changes itself and self-improves and self-improves and self-improves. That would be a really, really, really interesting test case. Is that how you're thinking about it, or?
I'm doing that a little bit. The issue becomes I don't have enough data. Sometimes you make decisions on too small a data set, and then they're the wrong decisions. So
Yeah.
I'm cautious of that. Um, let's get back to your overall grand thought process there.
Jack Dorsey's overall grand
Yes, Jack
thought
Dorsey.
process.
I think in matters of importance like insurance, when a claim happens, they want a human on the other side to be responsible. And so it's all good. It's easy to buy. And the people buy, sort of renters insurance and a lot of, insurance products online, sight unseen, didn't talk to anybody, sort of click, 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 bought it. But when it goes bad, and I've had claims, most people I know have had some kind of claim, auto claim, auto insurance, whatever. When it goes bad, you want to make sure that you can yell at someone and that they care and their reputation matters to them. Right. And that's like your leverage once there's a claim. So then you think about, well, you're going to need the person that's responsible. So I really do think that humans will be in that relationship, but people trust humans, right? So maybe they'll be fooled by AI, but I do think we'll keep up that standard where the AI shouldn't legally be able to lie to you and tell you it's a human if it's not. But that being said, I do think, all of this menial work that we do, and I call it menial because I'll go do it. I'll do the work and I'll think, why is a human doing this? This doesn't make any sense. And I'll get down to the nitty gritty and it's like, oh, well, these systems don't talk to each other, or this is how the client likes to communicate, or whatever. I think in 5 years, maybe less, it'll be kind of like how we used to think, children shuck oysters on the shore. That's their job. And they get their hands all cut up. Now we think that's barbaric, or children work in mines or something crazy, right? Like how we would think of that just doesn't make sense. Why would we ever do that? I think we're going to get to that place where we think, oh no, I don't want it to take my job too. Thank goodness we don't have to do that stuff anymore. It doesn't make sense. There's going to be plenty of work. I heard a stat, this is pre-AI, there's more, sort of programming nuances than we could ever have labor to solve. Meaning like things just don't quite work right. And you see it everywhere, all the time, in everything you do. There's always some little thing, little workaround, some little problem, some programmer didn't fix. And that is an endless supply.
Let me ask you this. Where will you not I know you can't predict the future, so I don't want like let's say right now, where will you not use AI?
I don't really like it in I say this, but I'm actually working on a project right now to get AI doing this. But there's a portion of talking to customers, meaning voice communication, when it gets into doing something for them. And I even like paying a bill or anything like that. Anytime you can have a communication, free up all the other things you do and figure out how to have a good relationship with that client. And that doesn't just mean the $1 million client that you go play golf with. How can you free up time, more and more and more free time, so that the other, 95% of your business gets that kind of attention? And
Yeah.
if you're able to be the company that's just personable, feels locally owned, has that great communication, you've got a person, they've got time for you, they can put in the effort. Now we're talking something special.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so one of the things I'm curious about, right, is it kind of like as a wrap up, you mentioned what you kind of see in 5 years, but if we're having this conversation in 10 years time, and for you, if everything went 100% to plan, what does that look like?
I think it's exactly that. I don't know. I do think a big shift will happen. I really do. And I think that shift is in uh, consumer driven. And the consumer driven shift is, if I take off my insurance hat and I wanted to go shop my personal insurance today, it would be so painful because I'd have to talk to multiple agencies to, get a lay of the land. I got to go to State Farm and Geico and Liberty and then Independent with Travelers and Safeco, and putting all those pieces together would be very painful. So then you go, hey, AI, can you just go handle this for me, please? And ask questions that I might not know to ask. Like, does your policy have water backup? Because these guys do. Your typical insured may not know even what that means. And so I do feel like a shift will come where it is more relationship driven, the final, like hit the button and buy it and let's go. And it will be even more important to have trust, that sort of core trust in that human. But I do think all of the minutia will be gone.
Yeah. I tend to agree in that, well, I agree specifically in a major way that relationships are going to become exponentially more important because expertise and advice are still going to matter, but all the little details that you didn't want to deal with are going to be pretty simple. Those are going to be pretty easy to do. And so at the end of the day, it's like, do I like who I'm working with? Do I
Yep.
trust who I'm working with?
Yep.
Because I can have my choice. So I think that's still going to be critical. And I'm not, many people have predicted that that's going to become more important. And I think a lot of people are thinking about how you are. Like, how do I free my team up to spend their time on relationships versus getting in the weeds on stuff that's just not going to be as necessary? It's not fully there yet, but that'll get easier and easier for sure. I agree, totally agree with that.
Yep. And it goes relationships with underwriters too, right? It's not just external, but internal.
Yeah.
Relationships with coworkers, right? The relationship piece is important. And we have this barrier now to it, which is this unbelievable amount of work. When you think about, we had a driver or a trucking company today remove a driver and all the steps involved in doing that.
Yeah. And it's going to make the carriers will have to adapt to it. And if they don't, I mean, agencies will follow the path of least resistance.
Yep.
If everything else is in place, right? The coverages make sense, all that kind of stuff. But like, it's definitely the path of least resistance are going to be what drives this, I think.
You want to relate AI back to music and wrap it up?
Yeah, I would love to do that.
Have you seen Suno.ai?
No, I don't think so.
It'll blow your mind. So you can make music. It's scary. It's kind of like when all the artists were mad about AI making art, right? Now it makes music. And it's been going for a while, but it's getting better and better. And so you can go on Suno, you can make a song, you can give it a prompt, and it will make something. It does get back to that, the curator, right? So it'll make a bunch, like infinite number of songs for you, really inexpensively. but you have to be the one to kind of pick out the good ones. And then as a musician now, it is great at giving you an idea. So I'll have, I don't know, 1,000 different little concepts of a song. And now you can load that in and it'll flesh out that idea for you and take you in a direction maybe you weren't thinking. It's pretty cool. So, AI is changing the world in a lot of different ways. I know a lot of skeptics. One of my good friends, he's a skeptic. He's like, what is it really good for? Where's the revenue? Where does it actually do anything? I think those folks have done a lot of like email rewrite type work, but I think you got to get into the nitty gritty, do the actual work, figure out how to make it. How could it be better? And then do it. Like, I don't think certificate requests are much longer going to be a thing. I really don't. When blockchain first came out, I was like, oh, certs are this is solved. Here we are.
Yeah.
However long later.
Well, that's a perfect place to wrap it. I'm going to check that out, which means I'll probably be equal parts excited and terrified when I see it. Like I am with every new thing that I didn't know until I see it. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Well, this is crazy. Lee, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you going through those examples. Those were super helpful. And I'm excited to have you on in the future to talk about this.
Awesome. I love it. Anybody listening, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, add me. I love having a good network of people, and people who listen to your podcast, Callan, are obviously in this space and intelligent and know what they're doing. So I'm excited about the opportunity. So thank you for having me.
100%. Absolutely.